Good morning and welcome to this EPC Elections Monitor event to discuss the result of the presidential election in Slovakia. Last Saturday, the 6th of April, Peter Pellegrini was elected president with 53.12% against 56.87% for his opponent, Ivan Korčok. Pellegrini, a former prime minister, is the leader of Hlas SD, a party that is part of the governing coalition led by Prime Minister Robert Fico. He will take office in June and will replace the outgoing president, Zuzana Čaputová, who was not seeking re-election. But in recent months, Čaputová acted as an opponent to Fico, for example, blocking the nomination of a minister and blocking a reform of the Constitutional Court. With Pellegrini in the presidential palace, will Robert Fico be able to govern unhindered? The question is important for Slovakia, but also for the EU and even for Ukraine. Because since he became prime minister for the third time last October, Robert Fico has abolished the office of the anti-corruption prosecutor and dismissed police chiefs. He also has proposed new law to put public media under political control, as well as new rules on the funding of NGOs. As a consequence, the European Commission has reportedly warned of irreparable damage to the rule of law in Slovakia. Robert Fico has also been a critic of the EU's support to Ukraine and has called for a ceasefire, while Peter Pellegrini campaigned while saying he would be on the side of peace, as opposed to his opponent Korčok being for war. So, how much is rule of law at risk in Slovakia after this election? What can civil society do? Will Fico turn into a second Viktor Orban, acting like him and trying to weaken EU support to Ukraine? In short, how much of a problem will the Slovakia of Fico and Pellegrini be a problem for the EU? To understand what is at stake, I will ask our two speakers today. We have only one online for now, but Michal Vašečka is with us. Michal, you are Program Director at the Bratislava Policy Institute. And we should have online Katarína Batková from the Iuris organization, which promotes rule of law and defends civic rights in Slovakia. So, let's start with you, Michal. And my first question would be on the results of the vote. Pellegrini's victory was a fairly large one, but after Ivan Korčok finished first in the first round 2 weeks ago, everyone expected a close runoff. So are you surprised by the final result? And according to you, why did Pellegrini win the election in the end?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad I can share some of our experiences with government of Fico and the election that we experienced this weekend in Slovakia. And let's go, as we say, in medias res. Well, yes, to a certain extent, we are surprised what happened in Slovakia, because what we expected was a very close race. And all public opinion polls were suggesting it. At the end of the day, we realized that both candidates were able to mobilize large numbers of new voters. Basically, both of them were able to mobilize non-voters, people who obviously were not voting for a relatively long time, and people frustrated because of politics. In every country, this group of people is existing, and some successful candidates, let's remember Donald Trump in last elections in the United States, might be eventually successful when they are opening this Pandora's box of non-voters, frustrated people who basically gave up sometimes in the past. Both candidates were able to open the box of non-voters, but Peter Pellegrini gained even more than Ivan Korčok. And we knew from public opinion polls that Ivan Korčok will be able to mobilize these people. The other camp was unknown. At the same time, we were not absolutely sure whether voters of openly anti-system, extremist political parties and political views will participate in elections because, you know, Peter Pellegrini, until the presidential elections, were still trying at least to pretend that he is pro-Western candidate, that he is on the side of Brussels, on the side of European future of Slovakia. But suddenly, after the first round, where he lost, he completely changed his campaign. It was a campaign full of lies, full of very non-standard steps which democratic politician shouldn't make, and we can return to it because the campaign was extremely dirty, even as far as Slovakia is concerned. And suddenly, Peter Pellegrini was appealing also to voters of anti-system political parties. And we were wondering how many of them will come. We were wondering maybe half of them. But at the end of the day, it's visible that most of them actually arrived. Most of them with a very strong anti-Western sentiment and pro-Russian and pro-Putin stance were voting in favor of Peter Pellegrini. And in this sense, Peter Pellegrini is a winner, but of course he will be paying a big price because he became a president also of this part of Slovak society, which is probably larger than in some other countries of the European Union. And, you know, such victories are not for free.
Thank you, Michal. And welcome to Katarína Batková. Thank you for being with us. We started just before you settled with your technical problems, so everything is
I'm
fine.
very sorry. I need to reset my whole computer, so I'm extremely sorry. Thank you for having me. And I'm ready to basically, Michal, I think wrap up all the important things. But what I need to maybe stress out is that Mr. Pellegrini wants on behalf of not only lies and spreading lies and disinformation campaign and so on, but they were breaching the law. They were breaching the law on the voting. They were we have a moratorium which you can present any political statements towards the election, but the party itself, the Hlas and other parties itself breached this moratorium, these 2 days of calm, and disinformation media were spreading lots of information during these 2 days, just before the elections. He was using. We have third parties in the voting system. They are banned. You cannot, as a candidate, use, according to law, any third parties that will participate in the election campaigns, and they were breaching this ban all over the election campaign. There were multiple third parties involved through anti-campaign against Korčok, through false websites, through false videos, which were sponsored on a Facebook page, and so on. Lots of breaches of the voting system, and it was in this way. It was something new that they actually were breaching the law all the time, and they were not lying about it. They say it openly. Yes, we used it, we breached it, we don't care. And this is something different, because then the elections wasn't fair. The arms of the candidates were not equal. They were not the same, and that's why this is, I think, a different situation when I think Ivan Korčok won the elections or any other elections, because they were openly breaching the laws, and they don't care, because the Ministry of Interior, who had the oversight of the election campaign, is run by Šutaj Eštok, which is the minister from Hlas. It is the closest friend and closest allies to President to be Peter Pellegrini, and he will not do anything about that. He will not, go for these entities which were involved in the elections. And he personally, the Ministry of Interior was breaching the moratorium because he published a Facebook post, and he paid thousands of euros for the advertisement of these Facebook posts during the 2 days of moratorium. So that's why this is a different situation.
So, of course, this raises the issue of rule of law, on which we will spend more time later. But you frame the discussion already with concrete examples. But compared to previous presidential elections, did this one seemed for the voters more important than before? We saw mobilization in the streets against the plans on public TV. How much did civic society, the population, mobilize for this election? And is the result a sign of a polarization of Slovakia more than was the case before, especially at the last legislative election, for example? So maybe I will ask Katarína first, and then I will ask Michal to answer that question.
The difference is compared to the last parliamentary elections, that before these elections, the parliamentary elections in September, the civil society ran a mobilization campaign on young people, which was very successful. The campaign was really aimed on you should stay in Slovakia and vote. So this was like a really good mobilization campaign toward the young people. It was very visible on the social media. We reached 1 million Instagram users in the month before elections, and the recognition of the brand of the campaign was according to representative opinion poll was 40% in the population as such. So the campaign has a good results in this mobilization, and young people mostly voted for the democratic parties, but they also voted for Smer and Hlas, but mostly for the democratic parties. So that's why I think the result of the parliamentary elections was so close, because our ruling parties have only 4 MPs more than the other one. Before these elections, the civil society decided not to be mobilizing especially these voters, but we see that after the introducing the changes to the criminal code and the abolition of the special prosecution office, then the mobilizing part was done by the opposite political parties. So there were lots of protests running by the politicians, not by the civil society. And the presidential campaign is really different. And we are trying as a civil society be impartial and be able to reach out also for people who are not voting for Korčok or for Pellegrini, because we need this impartiality in our work in the society. So that's why we decided that these elections are different and different in this way, and we would not do such a mobilization campaign. But I think the steps that the government was taking towards the media, towards the rule of law, and towards the civil society organization, because before the election, SNS introduced the Lex Foreign Agent into the parliament. So this was mobilizing for the people who voted for Ivan Korčok, because the number of the voters who came to vote for Ivan Korčok was tremendous, even though he did not win the elections. So that's why we stated a little bit, impartial in these elections, because it was problematic. Because if we did mobilize for one or the other candidate, it will be too risky for us in this way.
Thank you. Just for our viewers, I would just remind that Hlas is the party of Pellegrini, Smer the party of Fico, and SNS the far-right party, which is the third one in the coalition in government. So, Michal, as political analyst, how do you see?
Yeah. Let me continue. I mean, that was a very eloquent analysis by Katarína. But let's return to parliamentary elections, where also Katarína started. Even Robert Fico admitted what was very obvious, that since presidential elections took place just half a year after parliamentary elections, this was a kind of a referendum about new power, new government. And I must state, you know, as a Democrat, that in a way, what people said by their vote is that they are relatively satisfied with Robert Fico's government. They are approving what they are doing. And in a way, this is a very bad news coming from Slovakia, because Robert, you know, if we will start with Katarína now to just count what kind of steps Robert Fico's government is doing in the whole process of destroying rule of law in Slovakia, you know, we will be sitting here until the evening. That's an extremely long story if we will be forced to go into details. But obviously, many voters in Slovakia basically said, we don't care. You know, this is not the topic which is somehow appealing to us. And let me remind you what we were discussing after parliamentary elections, because this is something what has to be said again. Slovakia is still work in progress. This country doesn't have a consensus on certain things which are absolutely obvious in some other countries, neighboring countries, in Poland, in the Czech Republic, even in Hungary. There is not a consensus about what is the most important event in a so-called national history, what is the most important figure of our national history. So there are, you know, certain consensus is lacking here. The society is not only polarized politically, but it's fragmentarized also culturally, even, you know, I would even say in terms of civilization, where we should belong, why we should belong exactly there and not somewhere else. This country is, speaking about people living in a country, relatively anti-Western. These anti-Western sentiments are very deeply rooted in the minds of many people, not all of people, but many people, far too many, I would say. Country is relatively openly anti-American. Out of Central and Eastern European countries in the region, the most anti-American country. Country is relatively pro-Russian, more pro-Russian than anybody else in a region. I mean, members of the European Union. It's definitely higher in Serbia, but Slovakia is even more pro-Russian than Bulgaria, let's say. Slovakia is relatively pro-Putin. Putin was, before the war in Ukraine, very popular in Slovakia. More than 50% were basically saying that this is a great leader. Now it's dropped just to some 23-25%, which is still a lot of people who are, by the way, voters of anti-system parties, and now they voted for Peter Pellegrini, practically all of them. Not only voters of Stefan Harabin, but also of minor extremists such as Marian Kotleba and others. Country is full of distrust, dramatic distrust, which is even higher than in other countries, not only toward the democratic institutions, but also between people. And the consequence of it is that country is very conspiratory. You know, this disinformation scene is very successful in spreading false news, hoaxes, and this influenced the results in presidential elections dramatically. Exactly as Katarína said, mobilization on the side of Ivan Korčok was unprecedented. Unprecedented, uncomparable to anything else what we saw in Slovakia since 1999 in presidential elections. And in spite of that, Ivan Korčok didn't win, because the other side was mobilized, but was mobilized very often through disinformation channels with basically open lies that democratic camp, so to say, pro-European camp, didn't even have a chance to explain to those voters, because those voters are not following standard media. They don't care about standard media. They are locked in this strange social nets and social media world, which is not very natural. Just to give you the last example about social media. In Slovakia, more than 40% of the content on Facebook is political, and very often full of disinformation. You know, top 10, I would say, political content on Facebook is coming from extremists and people from Smer. Even Zuzana Čaputová is dropping out from top 10 on Facebook. So in other words, Facebook is completely toxic as far as Slovakia is concerned. And the result is what we see. So you have two faces of Slovakia, one which is very European, I would say people who are living deeply in 21st century with all the identities that 21st century brought, and the other, Slovakia, which is locked by disinformators in unnatural world, in Orwell's world, in very often where even words have different meaning. You know, suddenly black is becoming white, liberator is occupier, good becoming bad. Liberals are becoming fascists in the view of these people. You know, this is how, by the way, liberal political forces are called in Slovakia, liberal fascists. You know, so suddenly you have the world where even words lost its original meaning. And I would basically say that this will be my last sentence here. In a way, we shouldn't be surprised how the elections ended up, bearing in mind how for long years, some people, even with the help of Russian propaganda, by the way, are basically poisoning wells in Slovakia, and they are literally poisoning wells. And the other side, civil society, which is doing everything it can, not for 100%, for 200%, is simply not able to be partner who would reverse trends.
Thank you. So if I understand well, rule of law was not on the mind of many voters, or at least not on the mind of voters for Pellegrini, but looking at what the Fico government has done since last autumn, it's very high on its agenda. It looks very important to secure its power and the economic interest of its friends. So with Pellegrini in the presidential palace in June, what will Fico be able to do? Is there a plan on what he wants to do? Is it clear, or what is the ultimate objective of reforming the state of Slovakia? Can we see a whole plan that it's ready to be implemented? And just before giving you the floor, I would just remind our viewers that they can ask questions in the Q&A section just at the bottom of the window of Zoom, and then we will take time at the end of this event to answer their questions. So, Katarína, you have, with via Iuris, your organization, you look very closely at this rule of law issues. So what have you seen so far in the last few months, and what does it indicate, or what do we know for sure for the future?
I posted to the chat two links on our website, via Iuris website, because we, on the advice of the Hungarian organization working in the rule of law issues, they really recommend us to track record all the things that are going on in Slovakia in English. So we launched this English newsletter, which will be able to, on our website, you can go through all the steps that the government, and that it is now more than 30 steps that they are threatening to rule of law, media freedom, and civil society space, or civic space, broadly speaking. So it is in English, and you can then click on several, media outcomes and press releases and so on, so you can make a bigger picture on what's going on in Slovakia. We will produce this newsletter in 2 and 3 weeks period from now, and as you can see that there are lots of non-legal or legislative attempts to really attack the rule of law. There are lots of attacks, verbal attacks from the government towards the judges and the justice independence, even towards the constitutional courts. Lots of changing inside the institutions that are not like they're not legislative changes or systematic changes, but they're trying to threaten the representatives of the prosecution, the representatives of the judiciary, and to really like switch the narrative that the courts are in favor for the people in Slovakia. So they're trying to build a narrative that the courts are not independent, they are not ruling impartially, they are political activists or something like that. And this is something that is really dangerous, because we see that the change of the narratives is very important for this government. Then he can have open doors to really change the institutions, and the people would not care or will agree. This was something that he was doing during the opposition times. He were attacking prosecution, special prosecution office, a special prosecutor, judges, and so on, and all the government representative, Mr. Kolikova, as the ministry. So he was preparing people not to oppose these changes that he's really introducing now in the legislation. So he's now working on the narratives towards the judiciary, that the judiciary need to be dealt with because they are not independent. They are the constitutional court is against us government, against the Slovak people. He is not impartial. He is not independent, and he's now attacking the justices of the Supreme Court, also verbally, that they are not independent, they are against the government, and so on. And he's building this to prepare that the Slovaks will be prepared to changes that he's now introducing. He don't have a constitutional majority, so in the parliament he cannot change the constitutional court, he's talking now, and Pellegrini was talking on this issue also, that he will increase the number of the constitutional judges. But to make this change, there need to be a constitutional change. So he will need to work with the constitution, with the constitutional majority, which he don't have now. So hopefully he would not have that during the 3.5 years left.
Sorry, does it mean that he cannot do everything he wants despite having now the president? So that's quite important to
yes, for now, he don't have this constitutional majority, so he would not have a power to change the core of the election system, because the last government did have the one mandate voting system into the constitution. So the like really change to the court of the elections would not be able to do. The changes towards the constitutional court, the Supreme administrative court, and the Supreme Court would not be for now they are not possible for him. But what he will do towards the judiciary is the change in the judicial council. The judicial council composes of 9 representatives of the judges and 9 representatives of the parliament, president, and the government. So he will overrule the judicial council, and then he can press disciplinary rulings against the anti-governmental judges, or do not, this is something that was happening during Harabin era, when he was the head of the Supreme Court and the head of the Judicial Council, and this is something that we should be afraid towards the judiciary, that they will really threaten them on the disciplinary proceedings through the Judicial Council, which will be overruled by this party. And there are several changes that can be introduced into the legislation to really threaten the courts to be impartial, to be independent, and to rule against the government.
And
if I may,
yes, Michal, no, go on, please. Yes.
Yeah, if I may continue, because you asked whether Robert Fico has some plan. Of course, this was not a question about some master plan. Because if you would ask that question in Slovakia, people in their conspiratory minds would see some master plan. Well, I'm not sure he has a plan, but let me give you some good news and bad news. Bad news first. Let's not make a mistake here. Robert Fico is an enemy of open society. Robert Fico is going to change this country in many aspects, and this country is already deviating from being a liberal democracy into some illiberal democracy, or potentially to some kind of soft autocracy. That's a very obvious, let's make sure that we are on the same page here. The truth is that Robert Fico is doing not only what already was described, but Robert Fico is threatening also the population. Yesterday he was speaking about his opponents as about pigs, let's say. That will be on everyday basis. People will be hearing brutal, threatening words of a person who is running on full. Doesn't have any limits. Like in that song, there's no limits. We can reach the sky. And now again, they have confirmation that most of people in Slovakia don't really care about their steps, so they will be even more brutal than they were in last 6 months. They definitely, and just to explain what is happening here, because at the beginning you mentioned Ukraine and the support for Ukraine, which is in stake. Of course, you are right, but let me correct one thing. This is not the topic which is of utmost importance for them. They are rather utilizing it in a very utilitarian and pragmatic way, because they know what is the public opinion in Slovakia. In fact, they don't care. In fact, they are not preparing just authoritarian state. It's rather they want to strengthen their power and their oligarchic, or if you want, mafia state, which they already had. They lost power into 2020, and they want to make sure that it's not going to happen again. Precisely because of that, they are threatening courts and judges. Katarína described it very well, and she definitely can continue with very concrete examples, which are very unpleasant, I must say. I'm very disturbed to see it on everyday basis in Slovakia. But the goal is to strengthen their oligarchic state. So in other words, the Ukraine is just the game here. They are basically sending the message to Brussels. We will be speaking dirty things here in Slovakia, but in Brussels, we will be voting properly in order to confirm our European or your European consensus concerning Ukraine. And we will continue with that unless you will be criticizing harshly Slovakia, and most importantly, you will be eventually stopping Eurofunds to this country. If you will stop Eurofunds, then that's the end of the consensus concerning Ukraine. We will be behaving, you will be brutal on us, we will be brutal on you. Robert Fico sent this message very clearly already. And it should be properly read in Brussels, that this is the real message here. And so, and returning to the good news here, and because this sounds very bad, but the good news is exactly as Katarína said. Robert Fico has just small majority in the parliament. He cannot change the constitution. He cannot change the electoral system, because, hey, if he would change the electoral system, there would be a new story going on in Slovakia. Let me remind those who are following the news from Central Europe. If Hungary had Slovak electoral system, Viktor Orbán is out of power for a long time. If Slovakia had Hungarian electoral system, Fico would have constitutional majority already, even without nationalists and even without Pellegrini's loss. That would be, that would be a real nightmare. But at the moment, he cannot change electoral system. And on top of it, this is the only country out of the Visegrad group countries which is in a Eurozone. And in Eurozone, there are certain limits. You cannot manipulate your currency, which is always the dream of every autocrat. Once you are in troubles, you are doing something with your currency. They cannot. So, and then we can continue. There are several good reasons to think that Robert Fico might be very destructive for the country. Slovakia is definitely waiting for the period which will be lost. No reforms, the economy will be exhausted, etc., etc. I mean, this is not going to be, fantastic period for the country. But whether Fico will be able to create a really autocratic state, I already have my doubts. Not mentioning that there is a functioning opposition and there is a well-functioning civil society which is already opposing and will be opposing even further.
So that's very good. You're anticipating my further questions about what can the political opposition do. What can be the lessons from this election, where, as Katarína mentioned, there was a lot of mobilization for Korčok, but how can this translate into some structural strength of the political opposition, especially since there is no constitutional majority in parliament? So maybe, Michal, you can answer that, and then Katarína about what can the civil society do in this context. So, Michal, on the political parties.
Political opposition in Slovakia was extremely fragmentarized since the fall of Radičova's government in 2012. Also, that's why Robert Fico's governments were so successful, and they didn't have to even impose some restrictive measures against independent media and civil society in the period 2012-2020. I mean, they were not friends of independent media even at that time. Robert Fico years ago was threatening Slovak journalists by saying that they are anti-Slovak prostitutes, etc. So this is what we are experiencing now is not new. It's just more frequent and even more brutal. But, the words are basically the same. The truth is that opposition was failed to create coalition in 2020, which would be functioning, which would react on all those challenges such as pandemic and war in Ukraine in a way that would satisfy Slovak voters. And let me remind you how public opinion looked like just before parliamentary elections a year ago. 88% of Slovaks believe that economic situation is very bad or very bad. 80% of people believe that Slovakia is heading in a wrong direction. We never experienced anything like that. In the history of Slovakia, either one part of society was unsatisfied or the other. And suddenly you saw the population where everybody was unsatisfied. So, of course, it led to a very unfortunate situation after elections. And I'm always saying it might have been even worse, bearing in mind how public opinion looked like. But after elections, opposition was able to strengthen their ties to a certain extent. They were able to communicate and collaborate much better than in the past. And on top of it, at least to a certain extent, I don't want to go, Katarína will be smiling about it. I don't want to go too far, but at least to a certain extent, opposition was able to overcome certain internal division between pro-democratic and pro-Western liberals and pro-democratic and pro-Western conservatives on obvious issues such as abortions, registered partnership for LGBTI people, etc., etc. To a certain extent. I mean, I wouldn't be. I'm not satisfied with it, but at least something, and we can benefit from it. Ivan Korčok, in this sense, was a candidate and potentially leader in Slovakia who can overcome these divisions, because he, as a moderate conservative who is basically saying I'm liberal conservative, might be the one who can eventually, we'll see, unify opposition against Fico's government. But we will have to wait for his decision, because at the moment we see that he's deciding what will be his future and whether he's actually staying in politics, because that's also in stake at the moment.
We had another strong, well, not strong, but the figure of Michal in the legislative election. He is a former MEP. Ivan Korčok is a former foreign affairs minister. So both have this habit of, dealing with the EU. So can they work together? Which vision for Slovakia can they propose to the voters? And what can they do?
I don't see any reason why Michal Šimečka and Ivan Korčok cannot cooperate. But I was saying something more. In this respect, I don't see Ivan Korčok as a standard member of Progressive Slovakia or ally of Progressive Slovakia. I'm talking about cooperation of the whole opposition camp, where again, it will be not easy, but as Sheryl Crow was singing in the 90s, nobody said it will be easy, to overcome certain internal division will be very, very hard, bearing in mind also the fact that some segment of conservative camp in Slovakia is already pro-Russian, openly pro-Russian, and openly anti-Western. So of course, it will complicate the whole thing, but Ivan Korčok might eventually be the one who might unify it. At the moment, I don't see anybody else. Michal Šimečka is fantastic leader of one political stream in Slovakia, at the moment very powerful. Progressive Slovakia is on the level of 20%, which is very, very high. But some conservatives might have, suspicions, different feelings about it. Ivan Korčok eventually can overcome that.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Katarína, on the civic society, so you said in Parliament, the government can do everything it wants. We saw in Poland, for instance, that civic society has a role to play to defend the rule of law, fundamental values. But at the same time, we see that the government is acting against public television, that there is also a lot of disinformation. So what is the margin of maneuver for civic society in this landscape where fake news and propaganda and culture wars could be played by the government against non-political movement?
I think the basis is the information spread, because it is seen well before these elections, before these presidential elections, that I don't even know in my bubble what exact lies were spread in the other ecosystem of information, which is not, I'm not even receiving the information from that bubble. So we don't know what actually which lies of the other party were the most important to mobilize the electorate to come. So we have like these two information bubbles, which are not in any counter any touch with each other. We only knew what's going on in the other bubble if our bubble media will go there and seek the information and bring it to us. So this is crucial, because it is when you are talking about free media, we do have free media in Slovakia. We do have this commercial televisions. We do have this SME, Deník and Pravda, and these traditional good media, and they are free, but they are hidden behind the paywall. And what was happening, that okay, we preserve this media, we preserve the freedom for this media, but what we on the other part did, that these media need to be financed by something, and they are financed by our bubble, democratic bubble, through the paywalls and through the paying of the readers. But let's do it in numbers. The payers for these good media are maybe 300,000 people. 300,000 people is nothing. So only a small part of the bubble is reading actually good news, not lies and so on. The disinformation media are for free, and they are spreading the news also through the politicians, which are more powerful on the social media. So the hoaxes, the lies, and the disinformation are spread directly by the politicians, not by the media, because the alternative media are not so powerful on the social media. The politicians are. And what this government decided to do is that they would not communicate with the traditional media only towards the canals which are in favor for them. They don't receive any critical questions from this media. They are publishing everything that they are saying in a way that it's not, you know, critical or in any way, and so on. So this is the media landscape. So we do have free media, but they are not, you know, read by most of the population in Slovakia. So that's why lots of information which are, I cannot only, if I publish my opinions through this traditional media, only part of Slovakia will read it. Actually, this is something crucial that need to be overcome. Secondly, it was also one of the questions that was introduced is the field work, because even though we have this protest all over Slovakia, it was in the big cities. But in the small cities and villages, we have people who don't have any access to any alternate information than only from the social media bubble, which are they locked in, producing hoaxes, disinformation, lies, and so on. And also, there are lots of people who are connected with Smer, Hlas, and SNS and these parties, and which are doing the work on the ground. They are leaving leaflets all around the villages all around Slovakia, because they have the people that support them on the ground. Like when they were preparing the referendum to break down the previous government, you need to have you need to gather offline signs of the petition for the referendum. And these petitions were spread by the postmen in the villages. So they paid the postman to gather the signs from the people from the villages. They paid the postmen to leave the leaflets like from Hlas and Smer, and they do it willingly because they support it already. So you cannot compete with that in other way that you get on the ground, get to the villages, get to the people and speak to them. And I think this is what the political parties from the democratic spectrum, SIS, we don't have any regional references and offices. PS, which is a big city a party, and also KDH in most of the cities are not present at all. They would not do it. So we need a new on the ground, like, I don't know if a new party, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a political analyst or anything, but we need to go on the ground, because you cannot overcome these two bubbles on the social media in other way that to go to people and talk to people in person, to overcome the division of the information, to spread this information from our bubble to their bubble and so on, because this is the only way how to overcome this division, online division, which happens. And in this way, civil society can help.
So you need people in all Slovakia, not only in big cities, but I guess there is a social divide and geographical divide, which is very difficult to overcome, which I think also raises the question of support from outside of Slovakia, EU support or action from the European Commission on rule of law, for instance, or the question of EU funding, but maybe also
this is governed by the government. But what we actually now are experiencing is that Fico knows this. Fico is really attacking us very brutally, the civil society organizations. The Foreign Agent Act is introduced by SNS, but it's very nasty. It's not about labeling. It's not about labeling. The crucial part of this act is that there is in a way to expose transparency to the organizations. There is a obligation to submit the annual report, which is okay, but the Ministry of Interior will have a new capacity or new obligation to go through these annual reports, and if there will be some differences or something wrong, the Ministry of Interior can abolish directly, without judge, without court, basically any organization, or the most organization. We have several different types of legal forms of the organization, but the most used is občianske združenia, civil organization, and this civil organization can be abolished by the Ministry of Interior if there will be any anything wrong, anything. There are no criteria, there are no financial criteria or any other criteria. They can be abolished when there's something wrong, like this is written in the law, something wrong in their annual report. So this is dangerous for the civil society. And Fico knows that civil society is the only enemy that can really help the opposition to reverse the next election's outcome. So that's why we are the enemy.
Yeah, actually, I was coming exactly to that point, that this proposal for a new law makes it difficult to have funding or support from the outside of Slovakia for NGOs, which reminds me of what Michal was saying earlier, that Fico can be kind of pragmatic just to keep EU funds. So what is the limit with what he's doing on media, what his plans to do on NGOs, if the Commission opens infringement procedures or open conditionality, the conditionality regulation, which would help blocking part of EU funds? What do you know about what the Commission has been saying? Because some information has been leaked to the press, to the media. So do you know what the Commission has said to the government already? Or do you expect the Commission to do something concrete to address what the government has done or is planning to do?
If I may, Eric, and very shortly, we are running out of time. Fico already is expecting problems. Yesterday, he was already accusing the so-called West and Brussels that very soon the Brussels might punish Slovakia and Slovaks for their vote. You know, so again, this conspiratory mood. There is the hegemonic power, which is punishing Slovaks for their independence and independent type of thinking. So he's basically preparing population. He started to prepare population for it already. And we know everything what is coming from Brussels. We understand the trap that Brussels find itself in at the moment. Because, you know, let's be slightly cynical here. On one side, Brussels see the absolute necessity for having a consensus concerning Ukraine, war in Ukraine, and Russia as a threat to Europe in general. On the other side, there is a small country which is backsliding from previous positions, which is obviously and visibly threatening rule of law. But the leader already said, you know, if you will be changing Euro funds for this country, you will lose your consensus concerning Ukraine. So in other words, it's Ukraine or Slovakia. It's you know, it's small country where the rule of law is visibly diminishing, or larger picture of the future of the whole European Union and Europe, you know, or even global West. And Fico knows it. You know, that's the point. And that's why he's playing this dirty game.
So he must have looked at what Orban is doing already. And they are very close. We have information on how Hungary, or at least the Orban government, tried to help Pellegrini or Fico in previous years.
They were helping, yeah.
Yeah. So how can they ally together in European Council, or, you know, to block decisions? Do you see this kind of formal alliance coming, or is it more nuanced than that because they have different national interests in terms of funding, for example?
If I may, the alliance is there already, but there are differences. Hungary is a country which is not small, but of course not big. But the feeling is that it's a big country. You know, sometimes it's about feelings. Norway doesn't think about Norwegians don't think about themselves as a small nation. Although there are, you know, 5-6 millions of Norwegians, there are 10 millions of Hungarians, but Hungary still has this feeling that it's a big country. And consequently, also Viktor Orban behaves. You know, he already mentioned some 10 years ago, I don't want to be just the prime minister of Hungary or all Hungarians living abroad, but I want to be avant-garde of future Europe. So he's trying to influence AfD in Germany, Le Pen's Front National, Brothers of Italy in Italy. He even established think tank in Washington, D.C. in order to be able to influence Republican Party. So Fico is not doing it, and he will never. He's focused only and exclusively on Slovakia. Again, small country which doesn't want to be involved in anything, the country which would like to be outside of the mainstreams of the world politics, and Fico behaves according to that. But once Brussels will do something what will threaten his power, he will join Viktor Orban, or in some aspects he might be even more brutal, because again, Viktor Orban is playing the game which is not exclusively about Hungary.
So
yeah, and this is true.
You think maybe, yes, Katarína, before you go on, for now in Brussels, Robert Fico, in the last European Councils, for instance, when we talk a lot about Orban's veto on accession of Ukraine or the funding, Fico was not very visible. He was keeping quiet. So do you think he feels emboldened now by the result? As you said, it was a kind of a referendum, and he has more political, not power, but at least confidence now with the result of this election?
Yeah, and he's also preparing the narratives. The bad Brussels will withdraw the funds as a revenge for Ivan Korčok, it was Brussels candidate, or the European and American agent candidate didn't won the elections. So the Brussels want to punish you, good Slovak people, on the result of the election, and it was visible also when we turned to the European Commission before the changes to the rule of law in December. The response of people who were voting for Fico: why are you talking dirty about Slovak government because before the Brussels Commission? You are the bad guys because you are not Slovaks. You are paid by foreign agents, and you are doing everything not in favor for Slovak people. You are what is hurting Slovak people. You are the reason why they withdraw the funds. Not Fico government, but you, because you were going behind our backs and talk to Brussels. So we need to be more careful, and we need to and also the civil society organization and media and all the good actors need to really be able, because we know this is coming, but no one is doing any work with the public to turn these narratives down. He is just pushing the narratives, and if the opposition and the civil society will not get into the public debate and really turn the narratives that Fico is the bad, not that we are talking about what is going wrong in Slovakia, and building these narratives towards the public, then we are lost.
And if we look at what Fico and Pellegrini have said about Russia and Ukraine, how I would not say sincere, but how pro-Russian are they? Is it more tactical to get concessions from Brussels, or is it really a kind of link, economic link maybe, or ideological link with Russia? How far would they go into opposing support to Ukraine, accessions, discussions with Ukraine? What would you expect in that domain?
Eric, it's very simple. They will go as far as it will allow them to maintain in power. And in case of Peter Pellegrini, it's absolutely artificial. He doesn't care. Naturally, he's pro-Western, but in fact, he doesn't care even about that. He just wants to be in positions. Robert Fico, that's more complicated. It's not about economic interests. It's not about economic linkages. Robert Fico is pragmatic and well-educated person. He knows that Russia is losing also economically. That the strength of that economy is comparable to Netherlands. I mean, everybody knows that. But Robert Fico is a former communist. He's admiring authoritarian style of politics, which is, which is in Russia. He's inspired of that, and he naturally, is turning against the West and the global West. So of course, if you are turning, you need some partners. But again, once the public opinion in Slovakia would look slightly differently, Robert Fico will go other direction. Let me remind you, 10 years ago, Robert Fico, or more than 10 years ago, Robert Fico was speaking about the core of the European Union. That's he wants to make sure that Slovakia will be part of the core of the European Union. I mean, we knew that he's not saying it sincerely in the sense that he would be the greatest European, Schuman and the Fico is the next. No, I mean, this is not the case. We knew it, but pragmatically he was saying it, and we were happy that, okay, if even people like Fico are saying it, we are on the good path. I mean, this is great. Pragmatically, they understand the situation. Now, of course, he crossed the red line. I mean, he's in a situation of a Caesar who crossed the Rubicon. There is no way back. And that's why he's following in this route. And on top of it, they now see that it's working. People are confirming that. So it's a vicious circle. They are fueling the public opinion with all those lies and disinformation, and that completely conspiratory public is voting for them. So they are satisfied.
I think the difference is that what is the motivation of this government to stay in power? When you compare it to Orban or compare it to what was happening in Poland, the only interest of a Fico government to stay in power is to preserve their own freedom. It is a very strong motivation, and they would use anything that would secure that he and his allies from the oligarchs and from the party itself and from the representative of former policemen, prosecutors and so on would not end in jail. So they are preserving their selves, and they are very motivated to do it. And basically, they don't care about the country. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the future. They don't care about anything anything. Like really, they don't see the future. They don't know. They just want to preserve their own freedom, and they are not thinking about what will happen 3 years ago. No, we are out of jail. The courts and the politicians and the policemen and the prosecutors are out of the game. This is something that we care. That's why he is attacking the rule of law, because this is his priority. He don't have any other priority. That's why he's doing these steps. And he knows that the critical NGOs and critical media were, point on this. His motivation, that he doesn't care about the people in Slovakia at all, when they are not connected to the Smer party. And that's why he needs to, to focus on to the enemies that he built.
And if I may just to add something to what Katarína said, I completely agree with her. And I know how it sounds somewhere outside of Slovakia. I mean, somebody doesn't care about anything. And it's sometimes difficult to understand even for us. I must say, the level of cynicism and nihilism which is behind it is shocking me every day. So sometimes I understand that people might wonder from outside of Slovakia whether we really mean it, what we are saying. But I completely agree with Katarína. I mean, it's so nihilistic that it's, every day in the morning I'm asking myself whether this is true, that somebody is so empty and so nihilistic.
And Fico would not be in politics anymore if there will not be a threat on his people and his ending to jail. He will withdraw. He's not that, or he's not Orban who want to rule the country. He doesn't want it. He needed to preserve himself.
In a few weeks from now, we have the European elections. So given this weekend's results, What do you expect? Will Smer and Hlas finish first? And Smer has been suspended from the Party of European Socialists. Do you expect it to try to join ECR just to have more influence in the European Parliament? How do you see them in the new political landscape after the elections in Europe?
Well, if I may start, we'll see who is going to win Euro elections in Slovakia. As far as Slovakia is concerned, Smer will have strong positions, that's for sure, but also Progressive Slovakia will have strong positions. I mean, we expect it. The truth is that pro-European, pro-democratic, pro-transatlantic forces in Slovakia are demobilized after presidential elections. You know, there is a fatigue, and it will last for some time. But whether it will be Progressive Slovakia or Smer who is going to win the European elections in Slovakia, we don't know yet. But we can take it for granted that these two political parties, Smer and Progressive Slovakia, will be taking most of seats, definitely.
And about in which group it could go, there is no indication that he would try to follow Orban if Orban goes to ECR, because that's one also of the options.
I don't think
honestly, I don't think that this is important. I mean, we can speculate about it, but in Slovakia, this is so unimportant issue that information itself, that it's an important issue, should be saying something about Slovakia. Nobody cares about it. Even people who are opponents of Fico don't care whether Fico will end up in that group or other group.
They don't care. You can see it on the candidates that they are running for the European elections. They are not candidates that are on the top people representing the Smer in Slovakia. They're like old politicians, like Monika Beňová. She's in European Parliament for years. I know it will be for 6th or 5th time that she will be running, and so on. So they don't care basically. They just need to. They need to win this election, because it is good for Slovak people to know that they can win also these elections, but it's not important what they do in the European Parliament or anything.
So you don't see them trying to have some influence to redirect the EU like, say, Orban is intending to do. We have an interesting question from someone in the audience asking whether is there any way that Pellegrini will be in opposition to the government, saying that there was something similar with President Kovac and Schuster. So you know more about than me that the reference. So how close and to what extent will they be sticking together? Because in the past there were some differences between Pellegrini and Fico. So
Katarína is already smiling because, of course, we all have a clear view of it. No, Peter Pellegrini will not emancipate himself in the way as Michal Kovac emancipated in 90s. That was a very different story. Michal Kovac was a genuine Slovak nationalist, and I'm saying it not negatively. He was believing in independent Slovakia, and that's why he was with Mečiar. But then suddenly his deep devotion, Catholic devotion, won, because he suddenly understood that Vladimir Mečiar is evil, and then his son was kidnapped, and suddenly, you know, he emancipated, and he was the pillar of Slovak democracy in 90s, very clearly. This is not the case of Peter Pellegrini. Peter Pellegrini, first of all, would like to be re-elected in 5 years. Secondly, he doesn't care so much about the country. He simply wants to sit in a palace. Let me remind you that he was everything the politician can already be. He was a member of parliament, vice chairman of parliament, chairman of parliament. He was a state secretary, minister. He was a vice chairman of vice prime minister and prime minister. So this is the last position with, you know, so his collection is full. You know, it's like Nadal or Federer who won everything and they are now enjoying it. He will be sitting there enjoying himself in the same way as 2 terms Ivan Gasparovich was enjoying himself. He will be this so-called people's president. I cannot imagine what should happen, what might happen in order to see emancipation of Peter Pellegrini. And on top of it, both Pellegrini and Fico are pragmatic enough. They understood already that once they turn against each other, the whole game of the game was starting to fall down as a house of cards. They know that they have support each other, and then they will stay in power, both of them. So no, everybody who is expecting any emancipation is false. And I'm not saying that Pellegrini cannot return some of laws back to parliament in the same way as Duda in Poland returned from time to time some concrete legislative act back to Polish Sejm. But the mostly very unimportant legal, norms. That was simply absolutely unimportant for that time Polish democracy.
I think, again, what is the motivation of Peter Pellegrini to be a president is a selfish motivation. He will be selfish, very selfish. If the coalition with Smer and SNS will bring him the popularity and the power and the re-election, then he will play with them. If he smells some difference in a mood of the Slovak population, and there will be a new mood or some differences in the Slovak population, then he will turn and be the new pro-democratic opposition politician. He will be everything that he needs to be to preserve the president, to be a president of Slovakia. This is Peter Pellegrini in his core.
I'm almost speechless because when I hear you, I don't see any solution to what's going on, unless waiting for the end of their terms. But there could be several terms. So,
Eric, no, look, we don't approach it this way, and let me be. We
okay, I was going to ask,
a certain level of
you mentioned good and bad points. So
certain level of cynicism. We will be fighting back because hey, the difference is not between heaven and hell, but between a crappy world and a really crappy world. And these people are changing Slovakia into real hell. We would rather prefer to live in crappy world. It will be not fantastic, but it will be not hell. So, I mean, it always, there is always reason why to fight back.
Yeah, completely agree. We need to mobilize there were 40% people who didn't come to these elections. 40% is really a great number. When we voted against the Mečiar, the turnout for the elections was 86%. So we know that we have to work with people in Slovakia and to really go to them, to speak to them, to change their mind. And if there will be a threat to leave the European Union or something like that, I think this is the mobilization factor also for this 40% who didn't come to the presidential election. Even the difference between the turnout in the parliamentary elections and the presidential elections is 10%. So 10% stay at home and didn't vote in this presidential election. Let's say the president in Slovakia is not a crucial political role. Like when you compare the capacity of the president to the prime minister, it's so different. It is only. If Pellegrini will play with Fico, nothing really changes because he don't have any extra competencies that he can use besides the nomination of the judges and the head of the SCS Intel agency. So he don't have any competencies that can really overturn the constitutional system or something like that. So it is not it is a bad because of the feeling that it brings to Slovakia and but it also have a very informative, very rich information for us, the civil society and the media and the democratic politician. What is wrong? We have that information now. You cannot, be blinded by just doing anything on Instagram and playing videos. You need to go to people and talk to people. So in some case, we can draw from this information and to make a change in our behavior, change in our approach to work of the civil society, opposition, and the media, to really make a change in a society. So this is what we need to build on. So we have this with its civil society organization. We do have this experience with Vladimir Mečiar and overturning the way how the country was developing in a different way. We do have this experience. When you compare it to Poland and to Hungary, they were surprised. We are not surprised. We are prepared. We do everything in civil society to be prepared. We have networks. We have the support of the advocates, lawyers to be prepared to protect us. We have a strong coalition also abroad. We know we can learn from a Hungarian experience. We can learn from Polish experience and so on. Even our own experience half a year ago, when we run this campaign, this mobilization campaign towards young people, it was successful. So we do have this experience. We do have these good things. We also overturned the proposed changes to the 2% assignation mechanism at the end of the year, and there was no change in the financing of the civil society organization for now. We know that we are on the edge of the other battle for the foreign agent labeling and the legislation that is already in parliament, but we do have these lawyers on our side. We do have protests. We do have people that understands what civil society is and why it is crucial. We don't have this division that the Hungary civil society is really facing now. We now have a great network of organizations which are on our side, even though the good ones or not the political ones or something like that. So we can build on that. And we can overturn this. Maybe it will take 3.5 years, maybe more, but we know that we have this power, and people and lots of people come to elections to vote for Ivan Korčok, not because they know what our NGO is doing or something like that, but they are angry and frustrated, and this need to be channeled towards the good change in civil society, in society as such.
We have a kind of provocative question or remark saying that maybe simply the majority of society does not want to be democratic, and what to do with it. Michal, from your position of political analyst, is it something that has to be taken into account and envisioned? Like, is it the case?
Well, we have to take it into account, and the truth is, and let's be self-critical here. Slovak society needs a diagnosis where it stands, and very often, people don't want to see that ugly face in a way. Yes, this country is deeply polarized, and maybe half of society doesn't want to live in a free society. Yes. So in order to change something in the future, maybe not in 1 or 2 years, but maybe 10 years, let's try to convince them that there are some, there is something good about living in a free society. How come that 35 years after the Velvet Revolution, Slovak society, at least half of it is in this stage, that something was done pretty badly here in this country, because people, of course, that in every country in the world, every country in Europe, you will find enemies of open society, people who don't want to live in a free society. It's everywhere. But half of society, that suggests that, transformation was not going in a direction which is okay, or education process was problematic, or there were these, people who were poisoning the wells, and basically cause the regress in a society. So there are many reasons, of course, but we need a diagnosis of a society. And my own experience as a sociologist is that there are far too many people who don't want to hear that.
I would maybe add on that Slovak society is frightened. Most of the society is frightened, like really to death. And what is Fico doing is that he's surfing on this hatred and the frightening of the people, because they fear that they will lose what they gain after the Velvet Revolution, and he is really feeding this frightenness. And you cannot shout on frightened people. You need to share values with them. You need to speak about how this country could like to build on a common vision of how this country is functioning, how we want this country to be in the future, and to find really a common ground. And it can, most of the people, not maybe 15% who vote, 12% who vote for her have been really, they are lost. But it is the only part of the society to which there is nothing to speak to them. But the most of the people, I think, 85% of the people are frightened, and we need to share a common vision as a country, because we don't have that. And the politicians of the democratic spectrum do not offer this common vision for a new Slovakia, which will be functioning in his basics. Because when we go to doctor, they are not accessible. When we go to schools, there are no good schools, no universities. There is a big brain drain from young people. The families are tearing up, basically falling apart, because the young people left to university studies and didn't come back. And some of the peoples are working abroad for weeks and then come home only for 1 week. And this is something that needs to be addressed by the politicians of the Democratic Party, that we know how to deal with this. And this is something that the politicians of the Democratic Party are not doing basically from during that, they did not spoke about this at all.
It's 20 years this year that Slovakia joined the EU. Given the description you've just made, what is the main take the Slovak people have from this anniversary? Do they see some benefits from being part of the EU, or do they see only or mainly negative dimension?
Slovak society is divided even in here, but let me remind you that 20 years ago, Slovak society was the most pro-European out of all joining the European Union. There was hardly any opposition against the European Union, but that time we were proud of it. Now, let's be self-critical. That was a result of lack of internal dialogue, and firstly, and secondly, the fact that it was only connected only and exclusively with the improvement of material standard of living, nothing else, and even later, no matter whether it was Fico or Democratic parties, we were not building certain elementary consensus about our European presence based on some ideas, based on strengthening European identity. And I can continue. So in this respect, there is a lot of work ahead. And meantime, still more and more people are turning against the European idea because of anti-Western sentiments, because of the collapse of agriculture, which they understand as a result of pressure coming from Brussels. And they very often don't get the situation, as normal on a basically free market, that if your agriculture is not able to compete, then you might eventually have a problem. But people see it as a bad intention coming from Brussels, bad intention from West, and basically saying this is, and I can put it into the nutshell here. This is the real reason why they invited us into the European Union. They just wanted to benefit from it. And we are again serving somebody like in the past. This is the conspiratory type of narrative, which is very dangerous. and relatively a lot of people believe in it, you know, or maybe there is this disgust about our presence in the European Union. Vast majority of people, 2/3 of them, are still pragmatically understanding that its necessity is important, but very often there is not this feeling of belongingness. That's important, that they don't feel it, that, you know, you see just the pragmatic background of it. But that's not enough, because what we are doing in the European Union for a long time, we are building common Europe, and we are building common European identity. You know, it's something more, and it's the space not only of material benefits and a good life, but also of something more. You know, the space of rule of law, space of human rights. Space where you know, it's actually the best to live in a world. When you compare it to the rest of the world, this is the best combination of relative well-being, material well-being, and relative you know, sticking to human rights, liberties, etc. And if you combine everything, suddenly you're realizing that there is nothing better in the world than the European Union. We were not able to sell it to people, that they are living the best world they can have.
Katarína, the conclusion will be yours, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't think so that I have anything to add. I completely agree with Michal. We seem very pessimistic, but I'm really optimistic in what can I see, that the people in Slovakia are not resignated. The most of the society is not overwhelmed, is not frightened, and is not resignated. But we need to do the work that we didn't have to 10 years ago, maybe. And it is our responsibility to overturn the results in the other elections, to preserve the democracy, and we need to decide. Slovakia need to decide that this is a way, this is a thing, how we want to govern our society and what we want to do in Slovakia. No one from abroad can make the decision for us, because then it will not be ours and it will not be owned. So what we didn't do when we were you know, entering the European Union, or after the revolution, after the changes that the society needed to overcome after the previous regime, we as a society, we in Slovakia, we Slovaks need to decide this is our way. We want to be a democratic part of the European Union and the NATO and so on, and really reclaim this decision that was made 20 years ago. And this is our responsibility. We need to take it and make it make our best to do this.
That's the last word. Thank you very much, Katarína Batková from the Iuris, and Michal Vašečka from the Bratislava Policy Institute. That was a very interesting, very rich discussion, and thank you also for the people who stayed until the end. Goodbye and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.